My mother-in-law forced me to divorce my husband so he could marry his department manager. I agreed. At his promotion party, she saw me and bowed her head in panic. "Director, why are you here?" she asked, making my ex-mother-in-law's face turn pale. That night, I walked into my ex-husband's promotion party unannounced. No extravagant dress, no assistant trailing behind me. I chose a simple, tailored suit, professional enough not to be out of place in the luxurious ballroom, but understated enough that no one would immediately recognize me. Golden light bathed the grand hall. Soft music drifted through the air, and groups of people raised their glasses, their laughter echoing. I walked slowly. My steps were steady, my heart strangely calm, as if this were just another ordinary networking event, completely unrelated to the fractures that had once torn my life apart. The atmosphere in the hall was electric. Executives, shareholders, partners, and the press were all impeccably dressed, their faces beaming. At the table of honor, my former mother-in-law, Helen, sat with a ramrod-straight posture, draped in an expensive gown, a string of gleaming pearls around her neck. She laughed loudly, her eyes unable to hide a triumphant glint, the kind of satisfaction from someone who believes their family's fortunes have turned, entering a new, more brilliant chapter. Seeing her, a brief, sharp memory surfaced, like a shard of broken glass cutting through my thoughts. The event's host began the program, his voice booming and articulate, repeatedly emphasizing words like success, breakthrough, and new milestone. Then, my ex-husband Michael's familiar name was announced to a long round of applause. He walked onto the stage, confident in his perfectly fitted suit, his face bright like a man at the pinnacle of a mountain he believed he had climbed himself. I stood near the back, unhurried, observing everything like a detached spectator. Immediately after, the host introduced another special guest, the brilliant department manager and his future fiancée. She entered to another round of enthusiastic applause, wearing a form-fitting dress, her hair impeccably styled, her smile radiating the victory of someone who had just won a major game. She moved between tables, nodding graciously to accept congratulations, her eyes sparkling with confidence. Until those eyes met mine. It was only a fleeting moment, but I saw it clearly. The smile on her lips froze. Her hand, holding a wineglass, tightened. Her complexion suddenly drained of color, as if she had encountered something completely unexpected. She paused mid-step, her gaze locked on me, trying to confirm if she was seeing things. I remained still, neither avoiding her gaze nor challenging it, simply looking back with a calm expression. While the host continued his speech, something no one anticipated happened. She suddenly bowed her head to me, a low, distinct bow, her voice trembling but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Director, what are you doing here?" As the words left her mouth, the air seemed to be sucked out of the room. The music faded into the background, the chatter ceased, and a thick silence descended. Every eye turned towards me. Whispers started to ripple through the crowd, first softly, then spreading like an undercurrent. "What director? Who is she? That name sounds unfamiliar." At the table of honor, Helen dropped the glass she was holding. The sound of crystal shattering on the floor was sharp and dry. She shot up from her seat, her face ashen, her lips moving without forming words. Her panicked eyes darted back and forth, as if she had just realized she'd stepped into a chess match where her son was not the king. My ex-husband stood frozen on the stage. He looked from his fiancée to me, his expression a mixture of confusion and bewilderment. He clearly had no idea what was happening, nor was he prepared for this situation. I saw his hands tremble slightly, the confident smile frozen on his face, vanishing faster than the applause that had opened the night. As for me, I offered a faint smile. I didn't explain, didn't deny, and didn't rush to speak. In that moment, a memory flooded back with vivid clarity. The image of the room that day, the divorce papers on the table, Helen's cold voice, "Sign it. Let's not make this ugly." Michael's eyes looking at me then, devoid of hesitation, filled only with the determination to cast me aside. I remembered sitting there for a long time, pen in hand, my heart heavy, but I signed, because I understood that holding on would only cause more pain. Back in the present, I stood in the brightly lit ballroom, listening to the growing whispers, watching faces try to piece together fragmented information. I remained silent, because I knew that sometimes silence is the most unsettling answer of all. If they knew who I was, if they knew where I had stood and what I had done, perhaps they would not have pushed me out of their lives so easily. But tonight, I didn't come to complain or to blame. I came to begin a new chapter, right in the place they were so certain I would never dare to set foot again. The event that silenced the entire ballroom that night didn't happen by chance. It began years ago, from a marriage I entered with the simple belief that if I lived decently and with a little patience, our family would be peaceful. I met Michael when his company came to work with my firm. He wasn't a smooth talker, nor was he the kind of flashy man who made women turn their heads. He was quiet, humble, and thoughtful. At the time, I believed a woman's success was not in marrying a rich man, but in marrying a man who knew how to care for her. Our wedding was modest, without fanfare. A simple dinner for our families, some words of advice, a few tears from our parents. And I moved in with my husband and his mother, filled with genuine hope. At first, everything in my new home seemed gentle. Helen, my mother-in-law, spoke softly, always calling me honey. She had a kind smile and often spoke of principles, saying things like, "A woman's job is to support her husband. A well-kept home is a happy home," as she trimmed vegetables. In the early days, she would personally place food on my plate, asking if I was tired or if I was adjusting to the new household. I heard her words and felt my heart lighten, thinking I was lucky to have such an understanding mother-in-law. Michael was attentive back then, too. He'd come home from work, sometimes late, but would always remember to ask, "How was your day?" He knew I was used to an independent life and would sometimes comfort me. "You'll get used to it. I'm here." Hearing that, I was even more certain I had chosen the right person. I tried my best to be a perfect daughter-in-law. I learned to cook Helen's favorite dishes. I avoided things she disliked. When she brought up the classic mother-in-law and daughter-in-law dynamic, I told myself, just be patient. If I live a good life, fate will be kind. A turning point came fairly early, when Michael started getting opportunities for advancement. His company was expanding, his old boss retired, and several positions opened up. He was both excited and anxious. Seeing the stress in his eyes, I felt a wave of compassion. I thought, men face enough pressure in the professional world. It would be wrong for me to add to his worries at home. So, I made the decision to quit my stable corporate job to support him from behind the scenes. That decision, looking back now, I don't blame anyone. I only blame myself for believing too much in the idea of loyalty. From the day I quit my job, I no longer had a professional title, but I became the person behind everything. Michael often brought work home, asking me to review contracts, check clauses, and refine the language for clarity. Being meticulous and experienced with paperwork, I did it quickly. There were nights he would fall asleep at his desk while I sat quietly, organizing files, sorting documents, and making notes for his tasks the next day. He was praised for being thorough and prepared, but few knew that behind his success was a woman working diligently in the shadows. Once, I joked, if I went back to work, I'd probably get promoted too. Michael just laughed it off. "No, you stay home. It gives me peace of mind." He wasn't wrong, but from that moment on, I began to feel like I was being placed in a box. Home for his peace of mind meant I was behind the scenes, unseen, my name on nothing. Helen started repeating a phrase more often, her tone soft as silk. A woman who knows her place steps back to let her husband shine. At first, I found it agreeable. I thought stepping back meant being supportive, understanding, and keeping the peace. She would add, "Women shouldn't be competitive. A competitive woman loses everything." I would nod, reminding myself to be gentle. Every time Michael achieved something, she would look at me and smile. "See? A clever wife makes a successful husband." I felt happy hearing that, naively happy, as if my contributions were being acknowledged, even if only through a vague compliment. But life isn't as simple as the moral lessons shared over dinner. Michael's career did advance, and quickly. He became busier, his phone rang more often, His meeting schedule grew packed. He came home later, sometimes eating while staring at a screen. When I asked about his day, he'd say he was tired and tell me not to overthink things. Not wanting to bother him, I focused even more on managing the household so he wouldn't have to worry. I increasingly became like a voluntary housekeeper in my own marriage. The only difference was that I did it out of love. During family gatherings, Helen would talk about money, the future, how this family needed a provider. Michael would sit and nod, while I sat beside him, feeling like an outsider. When I talked about small household matters, she listened with indifference. When I asked for her opinion, she gave a cursory reply. Gradually, I realized I was no longer valued as before. No one yelled at me, no one pushed me away. The shift was subtle, so refined that an unobservant person would think it was normal. I comforted myself. He's just busy. Mom is just getting older. I'm just overthinking. I soothed myself with the familiar excuses women often use to keep a home intact. I didn't know. In my very patience, I was being pushed out of my own place, bit by bit, like water seeping into cracks in a rock, not loud, not immediately painful, but by the time you realize it, it's too late. And the most painful part was that as everything started to go wrong, I still believed that if I just tried a little harder, our family would be as warm as it was in the beginning. I never imagined that some people didn't need me to try. They just needed me to disappear to clear their path forward. After Michael's promotion, the imbalance in our home was no longer just a vague feeling of mine. It began to take shape, to have a voice, to have a name. And that name appeared on what seemed to be a very ordinary evening. That day, Michael came home earlier than usual, but he wasn't alone. He opened the door and called out, "Mom, honey, come say hi to our guest." I was in the kitchen, my hands still smelling of fried shallots. I looked up to see a young woman behind him. She was professionally dressed, with a confident demeanor and a bright smile, the kind of smile of someone comfortable in the spotlight. Michael introduced her. "This is Jessica, a team lead in my department. She was in the neighborhood, so I invited her over for dinner." I froze for a beat, not because we had a guest, but because of how casually he said in the neighborhood, as if bringing another woman home for dinner was a minor thing, not worth discussing with his wife. I quickly washed my hands. Walking into the living room, Jessica greeted me politely. "Hello, it's nice to meet you." I nodded, trying to maintain a polite smile, but inside, something tensed up, something I couldn't name. Helen emerged from her room, and upon seeing Jessica, her face lit up as if she'd met the person she'd been waiting for. She looked her up and down, then laughed heartily. "My goodness, you are so beautiful." "Sit down, dear, sit right here." She pulled out a chair at the table, poured her a glass of water herself, and bombarded her with questions. "Which department do you work in? How old are you? What do your parents do? Are you seeing anyone?" Jessica answered skillfully, knowing just when to be modest and when to smile. I sat across from them, feeling like I was attending a formal introduction for someone else. During dinner, Helen served Jessica so much food it felt strange. She even turned to me, her tone teasing but not entirely a joke. Girls these days need to be like this, smart and sharp. Then she looked at Michael and asked loudly, "Does she help you a lot at work?" Michael answered immediately, "Yes, Mom. Jessica is incredibly competent. She saved me on more than one occasion." Hearing that, my hand holding my chopsticks paused. Saved me. Those words landed on the dinner table like a tiny needle, not drawing blood immediately, but sharp. Jessica smiled again, her voice modest. "I just do my job," but I noticed her eyes. Every time she looked at Michael, there was a strange kind of confidence. Not the confidence of a subordinate, but of someone who believed she had a place. And Michael didn't shy away. He spoke to her comfortably, laughed more than usual, and even shared some office stories he rarely told me. Helen grew more and more enthusiastic. She tapped her chopsticks and said something that sounded light but cut deep. "A woman now has to be good at her job and good at making money. If all you know is the kitchen, you'll be left behind." She looked directly at me when she said, "kitchen." I pressed my lips together. I knew she wasn't speaking to me directly, but the arrow didn't miss. That night, after Jessica left, Helen stood at the door, calling after her, "Come over for dinner again when you're free, dear." Michael walked her all the way to the curb, chatting and laughing for a few more moments before coming back inside. I waited until the door was fully closed before asking, my voice trying to stay normal. "Why did you bring a colleague home without telling me first?" Michael frowned. "What are you thinking about now? It was just dinner. She's on my team. It's a professional relationship. Don't overreact." I heard the word overreact and felt a lump in my throat. I wasn't being jealous without reason. I just felt like a boundary had been crossed so casually, and then I was told not to be sensitive. From that day on, Jessica appeared more frequently in Michael's conversations. He often mentioned how quickly Jessica handled things, how well she understood the work, how she knew how to talk to clients. I would listen in silence. Helen, on the other hand, seemed to have found her ideal role model. She would tell the neighbors and relatives, "There's a brilliant young woman at Michael's office, so young and so smart." One day, she even blurted out in front of me, "Look at her and learn something. In this life, if you don't move forward, you fall back." From then on, I was quietly excluded from important family matters. Michael changed the passwords to some of our accounts, saying it was for better security. When I asked about our year-end plans, he said he'd handle it. When I offered an opinion on an expense, he dismissed it. "You don't work. You don't understand cash flow." That sentence stunned me, because I was the one who had stayed up late so he could have the cash flow he was now so proud of. But no one saw that effort, and no one wanted to remember it. Then one day, I discovered something even more painful. I opened Michael's laptop to print some household documents and saw a project proposal file that looked familiar. Familiar because I myself had helped him organize the content, edit the phrasing, and give feedback on each section. I opened it, and my heart felt like it was being squeezed. The proposal was perfectly presented, but the person in charge was listed not as Michael, but as Jessica. There was even a note in the comments section. Jessica proposed the optimized solution. I couldn't believe my eyes. I sat there, reading it over and over, before getting up to find Michael. I asked him directly, "Why is her name on this proposal?" Michael wasn't startled, just sighed as if I were being a nuisance. Don't scrutinize these things. At the office, who gets credit is a matter of assignment. Jessica needed this for her promotion, so I helped her out a bit. What's the big deal? I looked at him, unable to understand. Helped her out a bit by taking the credit for my work and handing it to someone else. I turned to Helen, hoping she would at least say something fair. But she just gave a cold, dismissive smile that sent a chill down my spine. A smart woman knows when to be quiet. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. You'll embarrass my son. I heard the word embarrass, and my heart sank. So their reputation was more important than my feelings. So I was only allowed to be silent, as long as everything on the outside remained shiny. That night, I lay with my back to him, listening to Michael turn over in bed. Then he said softly, as if on the wind, "Stop being so suspicious." I'm exhausted. I closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I just felt a very clear, cold sensation in my heart, the feeling of a quiet betrayal. Not a slap, not a curse, but a series of small, precise cuts, slowly carving away my place in my own marriage. I lay awake for a long time that night. The ticking of the clock was deafening, as if the house itself was counting down the seconds until I could no longer endure it. Michael said he was tired, turned his back, and fell asleep. I stared at the ceiling, my mind replaying a single sentence over and over. Who gets credit is a matter of assignment. The words sounded professional, but they made me feel as if someone had calmly erased my contributions, my position, and my voice in this house. The next morning, I woke up early and made breakfast as usual. I tried to act normal because I didn't want to turn the kitchen into a battlefield, but some things grow thorns even in silence. Helen came downstairs, glanced at the table, and let out a casual, cold remark. Since that young woman started helping him, Michael seems completely different. When a man is supported by someone competent, it shows on his face. My hand, pouring water, froze. I didn't have to ask who the young woman was. I knew. The scary part was that she said it as if I weren't there, or as if my presence didn't matter. Michael ate quickly, looking at his phone the whole time. I asked softly, "Will you be home for dinner tonight?" He didn't look up, just replied, "Not sure yet. My department has something on." Then he put on his jacket, and before leaving, he turned back to say, "If Jessica messages you for a document, please send it to her for me. I'm busy." I looked at him, feeling an absurd urge to laugh that I couldn't express. An internal company document, and he asked me to send it as casually as asking for a shirt. I asked again, my voice still gentle, "Why can't she ask you directly?" Michael frowned. "You ask too many questions. We're just helping each other out. Don't overthink it, don't overthink it." He said that a lot lately, as if all my feelings were wrong, all my suspicions a sickness. I didn't argue. I cleared the dishes, washed them, but inside me, a scratch was growing longer, wider. That afternoon, Jessica did text me. Her message was polite, professional. "Hi," Michael said I could ask you for the latest version of the project file. I looked at the screen and sighed. I didn't want to cause trouble. I didn't want to turn into a petty woman. I opened the laptop, found the file, and sent it. But immediately after, she sent another message, seemingly harmless. "You're so thoughtful. Michael must feel so secure with you at home." Coming from a normal person, it might have been a compliment, but in this context, it felt like a reminder. I am very close to him, and you are just the person who forwards files. Michael came home late that night, carrying the faint scent of a different perfume, not strong, but distinct enough for me to know it wasn't his usual one. I asked, "Did you have a meeting with clients?" He replied, "Yeah, the whole team went." I nodded. I didn't press him. I used to think a smart woman knew how to hold on, but I was starting to wonder how you hold on when the other person already has one foot out the door, only to turn back and blame you for overthinking. In the following days, the feeling of being disrespected came not from insults or slaps, but from small things. So small that if I pointed them out, people would say I was overreacting. For example, at dinner, Helen would be talking about her relatives and then turn to Michael to ask, "That Jessica girl, does her family have money?" I was sitting right there, but she asked as if I wasn't her son's wife. Michael replied, "They're comfortable, Mom." Helen nodded. "Yes, she has the look of a boss." I heard that and a chill ran down my spine. A boss of what? Was there only room for one boss in this house, and what was I? Another day, I came home from the market to find Helen on the phone. Her voice was low, but I could still hear her. "Yes, I'm thinking about it. A daughter-in-law these days has to help her husband. She can't just stay at home forever." She saw me, went silent, and then changed her tone as if nothing had happened. "Back from the market? Don't buy so much. We need to save money now." I forced a smile. "Okay," but her comment about saving money startled me. Our household spending had always been the same. Why was she suddenly giving orders? I began to realize something. They were slowly building an invisible wall. No one said directly, "You're not worthy," but every action pointed to that conclusion. I didn't want to believe it. I kept trying to convince myself I was just being sensitive, but the more I tried, the more I felt something being pushed away, slowly, steadily, and intentionally. One night, while Michael was in the shower, his phone screen lit up with a notification. I don't have a habit of snooping, but the light kept flashing, as if deliberately tempting me. I turned away, telling myself, "I won't do it. I'm his wife. I have to maintain my dignity." But then Helen's words echoed in my mind. A smart woman knows when to be quiet. How quiet? So quiet I had to blind myself? I pulled the covers up and faced the wall. In the darkness, I heard the bedroom door close, heard Michael getting into bed. And I felt a strange knot in my chest. I had overlooked so much, tried to understand so much. But that night, for the first time, I understood that some misunderstandings aren't because you overthink, but because people intentionally make you think that way. And that heavy feeling in my chest was a premonition that this wouldn't end with just a few words. It was a very ordinary evening, the kind of ordinary that, without a major event, I would have just considered another day of trying to hold a family together. The weather was a little cool, the house was lit with warm yellow lights, and dinner was on the table, untouched. Helen sat at the head of the table, her back straight, her face cold. Michael sat next to her, silent, his eyes fixed on the table as if avoiding something. The air was so heavy that the moment I stepped out of the kitchen, I felt my heart skip a beat. I placed a bowl of soup on the table and tried to ask gently, "Why isn't anyone eating yet?" Helen didn't answer right away. She reached for a stack of papers in front of her and pushed them towards me. White paper, black ink. The first words that hit my eyes were, "divorce papers." I stood frozen, the feeling akin to someone yanking a rug from under my feet. My body swayed, but I didn't fall, just stood there, with nothing to hold on to. Helen stared at me, her voice not loud but sharp as a knife. "Sign it. Let's not make this ugly." I heard every word, but my mind felt numb. I looked at Michael, waiting for him to say something, anything, that this was a misunderstanding, that his mother was being rash, that he would explain. But Michael remained silent, as if he had practiced this silence for a long time, as if everything was already decided in his mind, just waiting for my signature. I swallowed hard and asked again, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears, trembling but trying to stay calm. "Mom, what is this?" Helen crossed her arms. "What else could it be? My son is on his way up. He needs a more suitable wife. You understand, don't you?" The words "more suitable" were like an invisible slap. I turned to Michael again, my heart pounding. "Michael, say something." Michael finally looked up, his eyes avoiding mine, his voice tired as if reciting a prepared line. "I need someone more suitable for the next chapter of my life." In that moment, a chill spread from the back of my neck down my spine. It wasn't because of the words, but the way he said them, no hesitation, no guilt, just the decisiveness of a man who had already made his choice. I gave a weak, bitter smile, my lips stiff. "So you've had this planned all along?" Michael didn't answer, just sighed, as if I was the one making things difficult for him. The door suddenly opened, and Jessica walked in, impeccably dressed, her makeup perfect, holding a small gift bag as if she had just dropped by at the right time. She stood behind Michael, saying nothing, but her eyes, when they met mine, were the eyes of a victor. No triumphant laugh, no provocative words, just one look was enough to tell me everything had been arranged long ago. I saw all the pieces fall into place, the comparisons, the times I was excluded, the files with her name on them, the constant refrain of, "Don't overthink it." None of it was random. It was a path they had paved, just waiting for me to step aside. Helen tapped her fingers on the table, her tone a command. "Sign it. Don't make a scene. This house has had enough of them." I looked around the room, the kitchen I had scrubbed tile by tile, the dining table where I had set every meal, and it had suddenly become my courtroom. I could hear my own heartbeat, a mix of pain and anger, but the tears wouldn't come. Perhaps tears are for those who are pitiful, and at that moment, I didn't feel pitiful. I felt violated. I asked slowly, each word pulled from my chest. "All these years I stood behind you. So what was I?" I looked at Michael as I asked, "I want you to remember the nights you fell asleep at your desk, and I stayed up correcting every line. I want you to remember the times you struggled with a contract, and I broke down every clause. I want you to remember that I quit my job so you could have peace of mind." But Helen answered for her son, her voice cold as ice. "You don't need to think about it. You were someone who had lost her value." Those words left me standing still for a few seconds. Lost her value. So I was being appraised like an object. Useful, you keep it. Useless, you throw it away. I looked at Helen, then at Jessica, and finally at Michael. In their eyes, I was no longer a wife, no longer family. I was just an obstacle. A strange calmness washed over me, as if something inside me had just snapped. When people see you as an object, crying only demeans you further. I pulled out a chair and sat down. I picked up the pen. Michael flinched, as if he hadn't expected me to sign so quickly. Helen, too, was momentarily stunned. She probably thought I would cause a scene, cling to him, cry and beg. But I didn't. I scanned a few lines and then signed my name. My handwriting was steady, not a single tremor. After signing, I pushed the papers back, neat as if settling a debt. Jessica's lips curled into a slight smirk. Michael looked at me, his mouth opening as if to say something, but then he stopped. Perhaps, for a second, even he was unnerved by my composure. I stood up, not bothering to pack anything, just picking up the small bag I had prepared in advance. I looked at the three of them one last time, my voice not loud but every word clear. "There will come a day when you will have to address me by my proper title." Helen burst out laughing, a sound full of contempt. "What title? Who do you think you are?" Jessica glanced at me, her eyes mocking. Michael frowned. "Don't talk like that." I didn't reply. I just opened the door and walked out. Behind me, I could hear their whispers, their smug assumptions that I was speaking out of bitterness, that I was just another scorned woman trying to save a shred of dignity. But they didn't know my words weren't a threat. They were a promise, and it was a promise I had been preparing for a long time. They were just too busy seeing me as someone who had lost her value to realize how calm I was as I walked away. I walked out of that house into the night, literally leaving with nothing but a small bag and a folder of papers. I didn't take much, not because I had nothing to take, but because I knew that in their eyes, my name had already been erased. Anything I touched would be labeled as theft, greed, or an attempt to claim what wasn't mine. Just as I reached the door, Helen blocked my way. The porch light cast a harsh glare on her face, revealing a coldness she had once hidden so well. Her voice was a low growl, not bothering to be quiet. "Once you leave this house, don't even think about coming back," begging. I looked at her, the pain no longer as sharp as it was when I first saw the divorce papers. I just found it absurd. I hadn't begged for anything. I was just leaving. But in her mind, I was already destined to be the one who would return on her knees. Michael stood behind his mother, arms crossed, making no move to step forward. He spoke with the cold tone of someone tossing a bone. "I'll give you a settlement, a gesture of goodwill. Don't make a scene." I looked straight at him. He probably thought I'd be grateful, that I'd take the money and disappear quietly. I asked, my voice even but sharp enough to make him pause. "Is that what you think our time together was worth?" Michael's face tightened. "Don't take that tone with me." I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at him as if he were a stranger. The man who once said, "I'm here," now stood there, his face like stone, ready to buy my silence with a sum he called goodwill. I turned and walked away without another word, without a goodbye. As I walked down the steps, I heard the door slam shut behind me. That sound didn't just close a door. It closed a chapter of my life I had tried so hard to build. I walked out to the street and took a deep breath. The night air was cold, but my mind was strangely clear. I understood I had just been thrown out like an obstacle, and I also understood that people like them would never let an obstacle go peacefully if that obstacle could still make them uneasy. I moved into a small, rented apartment. It was sparse, with little furniture, but I felt a sense of lightness. I lived simply, no makeup, no parties. I slept for a long time, the first deep sleep I'd had in days without my heart feeling constricted. When I woke up the next morning, I didn't cry. I made a glass of warm water and sat watching the sunlight stream through the blinds. My mind was no longer filled with why, but with where to begin. I opened the folder of papers. I had kept certain things, not to fight over assets, but to protect myself. I remembered clearly that during my time with Michael, I had reviewed, edited, and contributed to many important documents. I had sat with him late into the night preparing for critical meetings. Back then, I didn't need credit. I just needed my husband to succeed. But now, those very contributions were what I had to re-examine. Because I understood that people who would force me to sign divorce papers over dinner would not hesitate to do much more to silence me. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. It was a former senior colleague from my old job. He had once been in a tough spot with a complicated partnership deal, and I was the one who had cleanly resolved it for him. I dialed the number and waited, my heart beating steadily. I wasn't calling to beg. I was calling to reopen a different door. The person on the other end answered, his voice deep. "Hello. I didn't beat around the bush. I just said the code phrase our team used to use for urgent situations. I need to reactivate file number 3, per the old logs." There was a short pause, and then the voice on the other end changed completely. It was no longer casual but serious, with a hint of surprise. "Ma'am, you finally decided to surface." I closed my eyes for a second. I knew that was all I needed to hear. I was no longer alone in this game. From that day forward, I began working like someone saving her own life. I gathered everything I had ever worked on: old emails, meeting schedules, draft proposals, edited files with timestamps, conversation logs that I had once thought were mundane. I wasn't loud about it. I worked in silence. Every piece of evidence I found, I saved to a folder, clearly labeled with dates and times. I had no intention of seeking revenge with dirty tricks. I was just preparing so that if someone tried to paint me as the villain, I would have the truth to fight back. While I was collecting these digital fragments, my ex-husband's family was throwing a small celebration. I heard about it through an acquaintance. Helen was laughing and boasting loudly, as if a great burden had been lifted. "From now on, my son will marry someone with status and power, not someone who leeches off him." Hearing that, I no longer felt the pain I once did. I just saw their true nature more clearly. They didn't want a wife. They wanted a timely accessory to show off. That night, as I was reviewing a series of files, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was just one line, but it sent a chill down my spine. "Leave quietly. Don't make me clean up the past." I stared at the words "clean up" for a long time. It didn't sound like a normal threat from a winner. It sounded like a warning from someone who was prepared to act, and to act in a way that left no room for retreat. I put the phone down on the table, a single thought crystallizing in my mind. They were going to strike first. This wasn't just about the divorce or kicking me out of the house. They wanted me to disappear from their lives like a stain being wiped away, so no one would ever remember who helped Michael get to where he was, and who Helen had stepped on to feel her triumph. I took a deep breath, turned back to my computer screen, and looked at the data folder I had compiled. I knew from that moment on, I couldn't afford to be gentle anymore. Not out of spite or hatred, but because if I didn't stand tall, they would push me down. And I had fallen enough. The next morning, I had just stepped out of my room when my phone started ringing incessantly. Not one call, but many, from unknown numbers, from the building management, and even from a neighbor I had only seen a few times in the elevator. I answered, and a gruff voice on the other end said, "Come down to the community room immediately. We need to clarify a complaint from the residents." I paused. I had just moved in, lived quietly, left early and came back late, and hadn't caused trouble with anyone. "What kind of complaint?" The person replied curtly. "It's about your private life. Just come down." I walked out with a chill running down my spine. It felt exactly like the moment I saw the divorce papers. The only difference was that this time, I knew they had already made their move. When I got to the community room, a few people were already seated. Among them were a representative from building management and 2 older residents. On the table, a stack of color printouts was placed directly in front of me. The management representative looked at me and spoke as if reading from a report. "We've received complaints from residents that you are living an indecent lifestyle, engaging in complicated relationships, and disturbing the community's peace." I stood there, stunned. Indecent lifestyle was a polite way of saying what they really wanted to smear me with. I looked down at the papers, and just as I suspected, they were sophisticatedly doctored photos. A face that looked terrifyingly like mine, with a strange man, accompanied by vulgar captions intended to humiliate. Not only that, they had also printed photos of me in the lobby, edited with blurry, suggestive scenes and captions that were disgusting to read. My heart pounded as I read, not from shame, but from rage. The rage of someone who had a false identity constructed just to be thrown to the crowd for judgment. An elderly man sitting across from me shook his head, his voice slow but heavy. "We can't have people like you living here. This is a respectable, family-oriented building." I looked at him without blame. Older people tend to believe what's written in black and white, especially when presented as evidence. I just asked the management representative, "Who sent these?" He replied, "Anonymously." I nodded. Anonymously, of course. If they revealed themselves, they would have to take responsibility. I asked for permission to take the papers, looked closely at each one, and then said clearly, "These are photoshopped." The manager frowned. "If you claim they're fake, you need proof." I didn't argue. I just asked, "Can you show me the original file that was sent?" The time it was sent, the IP address, Or the phone number, if there is one. He hesitated, then dodged the question. We only handle the complaints. The technical team will look into it. I understood they were just following protocol, but what I needed wasn't an argument. It was time to gather my own proof. As I left the community room, my phone buzzed violently. This time, it was Helen. The moment I answered, she started screaming without any preamble. A woman like you, I'll make sure the whole world knows your true face. Don't think you're free just because you signed the divorce papers. I stood in the hallway, listening to her words sting like needles. I didn't reply immediately. She continued to yell, her voice full of venom. How long are you going to cling to my son? If you dare say a single bad word about him, I'll make sure you have nowhere to go. After she finished, I replied with one calm sentence. You think doing this makes you look clean? She paused for a beat, then snapped, Shut up, you worthless trash. She hung up. Before I could even catch my breath, Michael called. His voice was deceptively gentle, the kind of tone a man uses to appear decent in public. Listen to me. Just stay quiet. I can still leave you a way out. I let out a small, bitter laugh. A way out? It sounded like a charity. I asked him directly. Did you do this? Michael was silent for a second before answering vaguely. It doesn't matter who did it, but if you want to live in peace, don't fight back. Hearing that, my heart turned cold. The man who once fell asleep at his work desk was now talking to me like an enemy. I went back to my apartment and opened my phone to the residents' group chat. Just as I expected, the photos had been circulated. Not just the photos, but a long post detailing how the new female resident lived a promiscuous life, had an affair, and even stole company documents before her divorce. When I read the line about stealing company documents, I understood their real goal. The personal smear was just the bait. They wanted to pin a crime on me, something serious enough that if I said anything about the company, I would be dismissed as a thief, a blackmailer. I went out to the lobby for some fresh air and saw a strange man leaning against a pillar, staring at me. As I walked past, he muttered a snide comment. No wonder she got dumped. She looks like a cheat. I stopped and looked directly at him. I didn't know who he was, but I understood someone had fed him information to create pressure. I didn't engage. Arguing now would only make me lose my composure and risk being filmed and having the footage edited. I went back to my apartment and opened the building's security camera app. I needed to know who started this dirty game. I requested the footage from the lobby and the mailroom. As I rewound the timeline, I saw a figure in a baseball cap and a high-pulled mask lingering in front of my mailbox. The person looked around, then quickly slipped an envelope into the slot. They turned and left swiftly. I zoomed in and saved the video clip. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. This was no longer just a smear campaign. This was a setup. I opened my mailbox, a plain brown envelope with no name. Inside was a photocopy of a contract and a handwritten note in sharp, aggressive script. Sign it. If you don't want to lose everything. I read it over and over. Lose everything? My reputation? My home? My career? My freedom? They were using classic psychological tactics, placing something ambiguous in my hands so that if I kept it, they could say I was holding on to illicit evidence. If I reacted, they would accuse me of blackmail. If I stayed silent, they would keep inventing more lies. I sat down, placed the envelope on the table, and opened my notes app. I took a photo of the envelope, its contents, saved the time I received it, and saved the camera footage. I wasn't panicking. I just saw one thing clearly. They had started, and they wouldn't stop here if I remained silent. I picked up my phone and sent a single text to my former colleague. They've started. I need Plan B. After sending it, I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. I knew from this moment on, things would move much faster. But I also knew that when people choose to play dirty, you have to play clean. Clean, but not gentle. Clean, but aimed right where it hurts. After texting my former colleague, I didn't just sit and wait for their next move. I understood one thing very clearly. If I stayed on the defensive, they would only become more aggressive. But I wasn't foolish enough to get into a shouting match that could be edited and twisted to paint me as a vengeful ex-wife. I needed a move that was subtle enough that they couldn't pin it on me, but direct enough to make them flinch. I chose to do something very ordinary. I asked to meet Jessica privately. I sent her a message in a calm tone. I'd like to talk, to keep things from getting messier. Just a quick meeting. I deliberately chose a coffee shop near their office, a bright, busy place with plenty of security cameras. I wasn't about to meet her in a secluded spot. I didn't suggest my place or any private location to prevent her from turning it around and accusing me of threatening her. Jessica replied almost instantly with a single word. Okay. That one word told me she wasn't afraid. In fact, she seemed eager for a confrontation. I had anticipated she would arrive with the air of a winner, and I needed that exact attitude so her own words would incriminate her. On the day of the meeting, I arrived 10 minutes early. I chose a corner table that was still within view of the staff and cameras. I ordered a warm tea. My hands were steady. I wasn't there to beg or to win back a cheating husband. I was there to draw a line. The sooner you draw a line, the harder it is for people to cross it. Jessica walked in, dressed in a sharp business dress, her hair perfectly styled, her lipstick a confident red. Her chin was held high. She looked at me as if I were a defeated opponent trying to salvage some last shred of dignity. As soon as she sat down, without any greeting, she said with a casual but mocking tone, "You signed the divorce papers. Why are you still clinging on?" I looked at her directly, without anger. I simply asked, "What do you think I'm clinging to?" Jessica smirked. "Michael, of course. Just let it go. It would be less trouble for everyone. Less trouble for everyone," meaning I was the trouble. I nodded, not arguing. I placed my phone on the table, opened the saved security footage, and pushed it gently towards her. On the screen, the figure in the baseball cap was clearly visible, sneaking the envelope into my mailbox. The image was clear, the timestamp was there, and the camera angle was undeniable. As Jessica looked at it, her expression changed in a split second. It was just a second, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions. She knew what it was, but she quickly regained her composure, forcing a contemptuous smile. "What's this supposed to be? Your imagination is running wild. Who knows who that is?" I wasn't in a hurry. I leaned in and spoke slowly. "Did you think the building's security cameras were just for decoration?" That question seemed to silence her. She froze, her eyes blinking rapidly. I continued, my voice still calm. "The fake photos, the smear campaign, the anonymous envelope. I didn't ask to meet you for no reason. I want you to stop." Jessica let out a sharp laugh. "Stop? Who do you think you're giving orders to?" I looked at her. "I'm not giving orders. I'm warning you, because I've saved everything, and I don't have a habit of being falsely accused." Jessica crossed her arms and leaned back, trying to appear unfazed. "You think you can scare me? Do you have any idea who I am at that company?" I answered directly. "I don't care who you are. I'm just saying one thing. Stop the smears. Stop the setups. If you don't, I will send all this data to my lawyer and to one other person at the company, someone with the authority to ask you a simple question. Who gave you permission to play these games?" At the mention of someone with authority, Jessica's eyes darkened, but she still tried to counterattack like a cornered snake. "Who are you threatening? What are you to that company?" I looked at her, my face neutral, no smirk, no smile. I spoke softly, but my words were cold enough to make the air around our table drop. "I am the person who once signed off on the very thing that got you that department manager title." That sentence made Jessica freeze. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes, which quickly turned to rage. She shot up from her seat, her hand hitting the table and making my glass tremble. She threw a contemptuous look at me. "You backwater nobody. You really think you're some kind of director?" Her voice was a little too loud. A few people at nearby tables turned to look. I remained seated. The more silent I was, the more she revealed her true nature, and that was exactly what I needed, not some fake apology. I said one last thing, just enough for her to understand her position. "Go ahead, keep trying. But remember, I don't fight my battles with words." Jessica took a sharp breath, her lips pressed tightly as if she wanted to say more, but she couldn't. At that exact moment, the coffee shop door opened and a man walked in. He was well dressed in a dark suit with a commanding presence. He walked directly to my table. He didn't look at Jessica. He simply placed a business card neatly on the table in front of me, like a stamp of confirmation. "Ma'am, call if you need anything." I picked up the card, and before I could speak, Jessica caught sight of the title printed on it. Her face went white, as if she had just swallowed ice. Her eyes widened, her lips trembled, and a tiny, shocked sound escaped her. "No way!" I didn't need to explain further. I put away my phone, picked up the card, and stood up to pay. Before I left, I leaned in just close enough for her to hear, my voice low and final. "I came here to handle this quietly, but if you insist on making a scene, I'm happy to oblige." Leaving the coffee shop that day, I didn't feel the triumphant satisfaction one might expect after landing a blow on an adversary. I just saw one thing more clearly. Those who are accustomed to climbing through dirty tricks don't stop just because they've been warned. They aren't afraid of the truth. They are afraid of the truth coming out at the wrong time, in front of the wrong people. So, after that meeting, what worried me wasn't Jessica's silence, but the silence of someone sharpening a knife. And I was right. For 2 days, Jessica didn't send a single message. The residents' group chat fell quiet. There were no new smear posts, no strangers cornering me in the lobby. The quiet felt like a respite, but to me, it was the calm before a storm. I used the time to review everything I had saved, organizing it chronologically, taking screenshots, saving original files, and carefully noting every detail. I wasn't impatient, because I knew the quieter they were, the bigger the blow they were preparing, one designed to leave me no room to recover. On the morning of the 3rd day, a thick envelope arrived by courier. It was addressed from Michael, the name neatly printed. I opened it, and my heart clenched. Inside was a set of documents demanding a division of assets, accompanied by a form for me to sign, affirming that during our marriage, I had made no significant contributions to the family or to his career. I laughed out loud when I read that line. No significant contributions. So the nights I spent editing his reports, the career I gave up to support him, the meals I cooked so he could have the energy to run his projects, all of it was reduced to 3 words: no significant contributions. A text message from Michael followed, a perfect blend of threat and feigned decency. "Sign it and we can end this amicably. I don't want things to get ugly." I looked at the word amicably and felt a chill. They wanted amicable, so I would be silent. They wanted amicable, so they could walk away clean. I didn't reply immediately. I laid the documents on the table, photographed every page, and saved the time of receipt. I told myself, if they want to play by the book, I'll respond by the book. No arguments needed. Before I could compose myself, my doorbell rang insistently that afternoon. I looked through the peephole and saw Helen standing outside, flanked by a few relatives. One of them was holding up a phone, clearly ready to record. The moment I opened the door, Helen barged in like a hurricane, her voice shrill, a classic tactic of a public verbal assault. "You fed off my family for years, and now you dare to bite back?" she shouted loudly, intentionally making sure the neighbors could hear, making sure the hallway camera captured my face. A relative chimed in, her voice sour. "Some women are just greedy. The moment they get kicked out, they start scheming." Another person from behind added, "Is she trying to blackmail them? Does she think everyone is stupid?" I stood in the doorway, neither inviting them in nor pushing them out. I knew their game. They wanted me to get angry, to retaliate, to say one wrong thing so they could edit it into a clip of a disrespectful daughter-in-law, an uneducated woman who was both a user and a troublemaker. Helen took another step forward, pointing a finger directly at my face, her voice a hiss. "You signed the divorce papers, so get lost. Don't you dare ask for a single thing." I looked at her pointing finger, then at the recording phone. My mind was a sea of calm. I took a half step back, giving them no excuse to claim I had pushed an elder. I took out my own phone, turned on the voice recorder, and started filming. I spoke slowly and clearly. "Why are you here, ma'am? If you wish to talk, please do so in an orderly manner. If you continue to cause a disturbance, I will call security." I didn't call her mom, and I didn't refer to our family, because that family had already closed its doors on me. Hearing me mention security only enraged Helen more. She screamed, "Go ahead, call them! Call the whole world to see what kind of woman this is!" I didn't respond. I just stood still, letting my camera record everything. I let them talk, let them expose themselves. Some things, the more you defend yourself, the more lies they invent. Only a recording of the truth would make them afraid later. After a while, a neighbor peeked out of their door. Helen immediately changed her tune, half crying, half pleading, her performance worthy of a stage play. "Oh, ma'am. She lived off my family for years, and now she's coming back demanding assets, demanding money. She's tormenting my son." I listened, my throat tight with fury, but I still didn't fight back with words. I just recorded, capturing every face, every sentence, every action. I knew they hadn't come to resolve anything. They had come to create a narrative. And people who create narratives are often confident that the audience will only hear their side. That evening, after they had left, I received another piece of information from a business acquaintance. The message was short, but it made me sit up straight. Tomorrow, their company is holding a party to announce a new appointment. He's getting a major promotion. She's going to be officially introduced. I stared at the words, and everything clicked. Jessica wasn't silent because she was scared. She was waiting for the right stage to strike. They needed a party, a crowd, to turn me into a laughingstock and themselves into magnanimous victims. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Jessica, short but dripping with provocation. "Come and watch tomorrow. You can stand outside the gates if you want." I looked at that message for a long time. I didn't feel angry anymore. I just saw clearly that she wanted me to come so I could be humiliated. She wanted me to stand outside like an outcast while she walked in as the future lady of the house. I typed a single reply, no exclamation points, no emotion. "I'll be there tomorrow, but I won't be standing outside." After sending it, I put my phone down and opened my closet. I chose a suit that was professional, not flashy, not plain. I took out a USB drive I had prepared, checking the data one last time. I sealed another envelope, containing neat, clean, and ordered printouts of key documents. I didn't need to bring much. I just needed to bring the right things to catch them off guard. Before going to sleep, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself closely. My eyes were no longer red. My lips no longer trembled. I whispered to myself, a reminder not to soften at the last minute. Tomorrow night, one greeting from her will be enough to kill them all. The night before the party, I barely slept. Not out of fear, but because my mind was racing, replaying every piece of what had happened and what was about to happen. I knew it clearly. They had chosen a public stage to stamp their victory, so I had to choose that same stage to put the truth in its rightful place. But the truth couldn't just be thrown into a crowd like a stone. It had to be presented in order, with witnesses, and with an exit strategy. Otherwise, I would be the one getting smeared again. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and reviewed the organized data folder. There were things I had once considered private matters, family issues that no one else needed to know. But when they dragged them out and turned them into weapons, I no longer had the luxury of being naive. I told myself one thing, bluntly. I am not seeking revenge. I am defending myself. I am not destroying anyone. I am restoring the truth. And the truth, when told correctly, is always more powerful than a lie. I had a different life before I stepped back for Michael. Back then, I wasn't the woman stuck in the kitchen that Helen mocked. I had worked for a major corporation, handled difficult projects, and sat in meetings where a single wrong number could derail an entire plan. I was used to pressure, used to dealing with people in power. It was just that when I got married, I chose to step back, thinking I was doing it to keep my home, to give my husband peace of mind, to make our family strong. I never imagined that my retreat would be seen as a loss of value. During the years I stood behind Michael, I had participated in a few strategic proposals from their inception. For procedural reasons, my name was still on some of the old partnership documents. To me, at the time, it was just a formality. But to people who know how to read paperwork, it was a key. Some people on the board still remembered me. They knew I was the one who had solved the problems Michael couldn't handle on his own. I just hadn't been visible, so they remained silent. but silent didn't mean they had forgotten. I met with my lawyer early in the morning, before office hours, in a small, discreet office. The lawyer looked at the stack of papers I brought, didn't say much, and asked just one question. "Do you want to settle this quietly, or do you want to win?" I replied instantly. "I want to be cleared. I want everything to be transparent, legal, and in order, so they can't twist black into white." I presented the evidence of the smear campaign: the photoshopped images, the anonymous envelope, the security camera footage, and the asset division form demanding I sign away my contributions. The lawyer nodded, his voice firm. "What they're doing is enough for us to counterattack. But you have to maintain discipline. No direct arguments, no losing your temper." I nodded. I understood. For the past few days, they had been trying to push me into an emotional state so they could declare this woman is crazy. I wouldn't give them that excuse. I just needed to stand firm. After leaving the lawyer's office, I called my former colleague. He answered quickly, his voice efficient. "Are you ready?" "I am," I replied. "But I want to confirm the plan. I don't want to show up too early or too late." Too early, and they'd have time to shut me down, cut the power, and escort me out. Too late, and they would have already framed the narrative to their liking. I made it clear. I will appear at the exact, pivotal moment, not before, not after. I set a condition for him that was also a condition for myself. I don't want to ruin anyone with rumors. I want them to expose themselves in front of the crowd. My colleague paused for a beat, then replied like a seasoned professional. "Then let them do the talking. You just need to walk through the right door." Hearing the words "right door," my heart settled. In games of power, which door you enter is more important than how fast you move. The wrong door makes you a troublemaker. The right door makes you an invited guest. That afternoon, I received another piece of confirmed information through an acquaintance in the system. The information was brief but enough to make me exhale. Jessica had a black mark on her record from a previous job. She had altered her personal information to hide a sensitive period in her work history to climb the ladder faster. This wasn't a rumor. It was a verifiable trail that the HR board could investigate if they chose to. I didn't release it immediately. I knew that releasing it early would be seen as a smear. Releasing it at the right moment would turn it into a question they were forced to answer. I chose to bring only my primary weapon, a document proving that the project Michael was taking credit for was actually born from proposals and edits in which I had participated. I wouldn't claim my work with my voice. I would let the paper do the talking. Paper doesn't argue. It's either real or fake. And I knew what I held was real. That evening, before leaving my apartment, I checked 3 things: the USB drive with the data, the sealed envelope, and my fully charged phone. I didn't bring anything extra. I didn't want the story to be diluted by cheap drama. I just needed enough evidence so that when they tried to blame me, they would get trapped in their own words. On the way to the party, I sat in the back of the car, watching the streetlights blur past the window. I didn't feel like someone on a mission for revenge. I felt like I was heading to a critical meeting where every mistake had a price. I had already planned my 3 steps like a symphony: enter, stand, and wait. Wait for her to bow her head. I didn't need to push anyone onto the stage. I just needed to be in the right place so that when she saw me, she would say the very thing that would destroy them. I stepped out of the car, adjusted my collar, and took a breath. From outside the ballroom, the music was already playing. People were laughing, taking pictures, raising their glasses. Everyone thought tonight was a coronation, but I knew that for me, and for those who had chosen to play dirty, it was actually a trial. I walked into the ballroom with a pace slow enough that no one could accuse me of being rushed, yet firm enough that no one could see me as a trespasser. The glass doors opened, and a wave of cool air hit my face. The music swelled, the chatter grew louder, the clinking of glasses filled the air. Everything was bright, polished, the very picture of what people call success. On the stage, the host was holding a microphone, his voice enthusiastic. "Let's congratulate Michael on his new position as vice president, a new milestone for our company." A wave of applause erupted. I stood at the edge of the ballroom for a few seconds, looking straight ahead, reminding myself of the plan. Enter, stand, wait. Not one extra step. At the central table of honor, Helen sat adorned in sparkling jewelry, laughing boisterously, her voice loud enough for the next table to hear. From now on, my family enters a new chapter. She raised her glass, her face radiant with the smug satisfaction of someone who believed they had just cleared an obstacle. I glanced at her for a moment, then looked away. I wasn't here to watch her gloat. I was here to make her swallow her own words. Michael stood near the stage, shaking hands and accepting congratulations. He wore a black suit, his hair neatly styled, his smile perfected for a young executive, but his eyes darted around, constantly scanning the room. When he turned towards the entrance, his gaze fell on me. The smile on his face froze. I could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. He quickly descended the steps and strode towards me, his brow furrowed, his voice low but laced with authority. "What are you doing here? Are you trying to cause a scene?" The question was phrased as if he were the victim and I were the troublemaker. I looked at him without flinching, my reply short and cold. "I'm here to attend the party, just as you all invited me to." Michael paused. He started to say something else, but his eyes caught a few people nearby watching us. He couldn't afford to lose his composure here. He forced his voice to be softer, but the underlying aggression was still there. "Go home." "Don't embarrass me," I answered directly. "I'm not embarrassing you. You're doing that to yourself." With that, I walked past him. I didn't push him, nor did I sidestep him. I simply walked past him as if he were a cracked wall. I moved deeper into the room. Everything was still proceeding according to their script. The music, the congratulations, the host announcing the name of the man of the hour, and at that moment, Jessica appeared. She entered from the left side of the ballroom, surrounded by a group of people. Someone laughed loudly. "Jessica, you look absolutely radiant tonight." Jessica smiled, gracefully adjusting her hair, her eyes confident, as if the entire ballroom were her personal stage. Until she saw me. I saw the reaction on her face with perfect clarity. The smile vanished. The hand holding her wineglass clenched, her knuckles turning white. Her eyes darted around like someone who had just seen something forbidden. She froze mid-step, then tried to regain her composure, taking a deep breath. I knew she was telling herself, "It can't be. I must be seeing things." But she wasn't. I stood there, calm, like a mirror forcing her to confront reality. I walked past her, offering no greeting, no intense stare, just continuing on my path. And in that precise moment, Jessica did the one thing that brought the entire event to a standstill. She suddenly bowed her head, a very low bow, her voice trembling with an unmistakable fear. "Director, what are you doing here?" One sentence, just one sentence, and all the sound in the room seemed to vanish. I could still hear the music playing, but it felt distant. I heard whispers erupt, first scattered, then spreading rapidly. "What director? Who is she? Wait, isn't that his ex-wife?" Someone raised an eyebrow, looking me up and down, trying to fit me into a role at this party. On the stage, Michael was also frozen. I saw the microphone in his hand tremble slightly. At the table of honor, Helen was raising her glass when her hand stopped midair. The glass slipped from her fingers, hit the table, rolled, and fell to the floor with a sickening crash. She shot up from her chair, her face as pale as if she'd been doused with cold water. She looked at Jessica, then turned to me, her mouth stammering, her voice panicked. You've mistaken her for someone else." She tried to laugh, but it came out as a warped grimace. She wanted to pull Jessica back, but her feet seemed glued to the floor. I didn't explain right away. I didn't need to. I just looked up at the stage, directly at the host and Michael, my voice audible but not loud. "It's a celebration. Please, continue." That wasn't said to be magnanimous. It was a small, sharp knife, twisting into the illusion they were clinging to, that they were in control of everything. The next moment unfolded exactly as I had planned. From the right side of the ballroom, an older gentleman in a gray suit with a distinguished air walked directly towards me. He didn't look at Michael, nor did he pay any attention to the staring eyes. He stopped in front of me, gave a respectful nod, and his voice was deep and clear. "Ma'am, you're right on time. The board is waiting." That sentence was like a gavel striking down. I saw Michael's face drain of all color. I saw Helen stiffen, her hands gripping the edge of the table. I saw Jessica standing motionless, the wine glass trembling in her hand. The ballroom was still bright, the music still playing, the flowers still fresh. But from that moment on, everyone understood the party had a new host. And I, the person they had discarded as having lost all value, was standing in the center of their victory celebration with a title they didn't dare to say out loud. After the older gentleman said the board is waiting, the entire ballroom felt as if it were being suffocated. The host stood awkwardly on stage, his eyes darting around for a cue. Michael could no longer maintain his composure. He strode forward, grabbed the microphone, and forced a strained smile, trying to do damage control amidst the whispers that were spreading like wildfire. "Everyone, please calm down. This is just my ex-wife. There must be some kind of misunderstanding. Please, don't get the wrong idea." He said the words ex-wife quickly, wanting to stick a label on me so everyone would see me through that lens, the discarded one, the irrelevant one. I looked at him for a second, and in that second, I saw the panic behind his mask. This man wasn't afraid of me ruining his party. He was afraid of something else, afraid of real power confronting him on the stage he thought was his own. I didn't fight for the microphone. I simply took one step up, raised my hand to request 30 seconds, like one would in a formal meeting. My voice was calm, not high, not hostile, but resonant enough for the entire hall to hear. I am not here to ruin a party. I am here to claim what belongs to me. That statement made many people pause. If an ex-wife came to cause trouble, she would scream, cry, curse, demand justice. But I stood there. My tone that of someone attending a scheduled business meeting. I looked directly at the crowd, at the scrutinizing faces. I didn't bring up our marriage. I didn't mention the divorce papers. I went straight to the one thing they feared most. I pulled a security badge and an official invitation with a verified seal from my pocket, holding them up just enough for those nearby to see first. Then I turned slightly towards the host. "I am the representative for the capital investment from our strategic partner. I am here tonight as per a confirmed work schedule." After I spoke, I paused for a beat, just one beat, but enough for the experienced people in the room to know this was no joke. A sharp sound escaped Michael. He had lost control. His voice suddenly cracked with aggression in the middle of the hall. "Are you staging this? On what authority?" That question, "On what authority?" sounded exactly like how Helen had asked me when I said, "There will come a day when you will have to address me by my proper title." Back then, they had smirked. Now, they couldn't even manage a smile. I turned to look at Michael, my gaze direct, not challenging, just clear as a straight line. "On the authority of the person who can freeze the funding and who signed the approval for the partnership package you are taking credit for." As soon as I said that, the whispers erupted into a roar. People started recording on their phones. Some leaned in to whisper urgently to their neighbors. Freeze the funding? What approval? Strategic partner? To an ordinary person, these words might sound foreign, but in the business world, they were the lifeblood. Down below, Jessica stood as if turned to stone. She took a step back, her lips moving, her voice a barely audible whisper. I didn't know. I thought you had been fired." She said the word fired and then bit her lip. She probably just realized that word accidentally revealed more than she intended. Fired from what? From the company? From Michael's life? Or from a position she never even understood I held? Seeing Jessica's distress only made Michael more frantic. He turned and hissed at her, but the microphone was still on, so the entire hall heard a faint, "Shut up." Then he turned back to me, trying to reclaim his executive tone but failing to hide his bitterness. "You say you can freeze the funding. Who do you think you are to threaten this company?" I didn't respond with emotion. I took another half step forward, placed my badge and invitation on the lectern, and said decisively, "I am not threatening, I am informing. Because this is a conditional investment. A breach of terms means a freeze." Helen, at the table of honor, couldn't take it anymore. She stormed towards the stage, her face flushed, her eyes bulging as if she wanted to tear me apart. She swung her hand to slap me, screaming until her voice was hoarse. "You vicious woman! You set my son up." If security and a few people nearby hadn't stopped her, she probably would have. Being held back only made her scream louder. "Let me go! She's destroying my family. She's getting revenge." The word revenge sounded so familiar, just like how they always wanted to paint me as the villain so they could play the victim. I didn't retreat, nor did I move towards her. I just looked at Helen and said one calm thing that was enough to make her choke on her words. "You say I set a trap, so what are you afraid of?" Helen was speechless, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. In that moment, I knew she wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of the truth. The host stood like a statue. The entire hall was no longer a party. It had turned into a storm. More people were recording. The whispers had become open discussions. Michael looked around, his eyes red, beads of sweat on his temples. He understood that his image as the new vice president was slipping away right where he thought he would be celebrated. I signaled to the technician below the stage. A large screen behind the stage lit up. I didn't play a private video. I didn't show the photoshopped pictures. I displayed a single, short slide, the kind of thing that sends a chill down the spine of any business professional. Project name, file code, approval line, signature, and confirmation timestamp. Simple, clean, no frills. I pointed to the approval line and delivered the final blow. My voice wasn't loud, but it hit them right in the heart. Whoever forged this signature will expose themselves tonight. The moment those words were spoken, Michael looked as if he had been electrocuted. Jessica turned pale and took another step back. Helen could no longer scream. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. And I stood there, under the stage lights, not to show off my power, but to put one thing on the table. The truth had begun to speak. As soon as the words, "Whoever forged this signature will expose themselves tonight," left my lips, I felt the atmosphere in the ballroom shift dramatically. Those recording on their phones moved closer. The whispers turned into open, public discussion. Michael stood on stage, his face devoid of color. He had no choice but to change his strategy. When cornered, people often play a familiar card. They turn themselves into the victim and their opponent into the criminal. Michael snatched the microphone, his voice becoming sharp as he tried to project an image of strength to regain control. "Security, detain her. She has stolen internal company documents." The word "detain" echoed, startling many in the crowd. Several security guards immediately moved forward, forming a semicircle in front of me. At that moment, if I were the me of the past, I would have paled, my hands would have trembled, and I would have frantically tried to defend myself. But I had anticipated this move ever since I received that anonymous envelope in my mailbox. They would always want to label me with the word thief, so that anything I said afterward would be dismissed as blackmail. Before anyone could react, Jessica immediately jumped in, her voice shrill, feigning righteousness. "That's right! She's blackmailing the company! I have proof!" She spoke loudly, ensuring the recording phones captured every word. Her tone wasn't meant to uncover the truth. It was meant to frame public opinion. I looked at her and saw the panic in her eyes, even as her mouth continued to shout. A frightened person often speaks louder than necessary, thinking volume can drown out the truth. Helen didn't miss her cue either. She instantly switched from panic to theatrical sobbing, her voice tragic. "Oh my God, she's getting revenge. She wants to ruin my son. She's destroying his life." She even beat her chest, swaying as if she were about to collapse, all for the benefit of her audience. I listened and just felt sad. Sad that people could trample on others and still so smoothly cast themselves as the victims. The atmosphere was like a makeshift courtroom. Some people recorded, some debated, and some just stared at me, waiting for me to break down. Security moved closer, one guard even extending a hand as if to demand my cooperation. Michael pointed a finger at me, his eyes bloodshot. "Give back the documents now. Don't think you can do whatever you want." I looked directly at him, then at the circle of security guards, and said one simple sentence, with not a single extra word. "Calling security is the right thing to do. I've been waiting for them too." That made Michael freeze for a beat. A real criminal would be afraid of security, afraid of being detained, afraid of being questioned. But my saying I was waiting implied I was prepared. I took a half step back to de-escalate any sense of confrontation and then gestured towards the ballroom entrance. Instantly, my lawyer walked in. He wasn't hurried, not dramatic. He walked with a calm, steady gait, like someone arriving for a scheduled appointment. In his hand was a thick, neatly organized binder. My lawyer placed the binder on a table near the stage, opening it in full view of the security guards and a few company representatives. His voice was clear and composed. "I am the legal representative for Ms." He stated my full name before continuing. "We have certified copies and corresponding data logs related to the allegations that have just been made." Michael immediately snapped. "What data? She stole it." My lawyer didn't argue. He just turned the pages, presenting the one thing that couldn't be dismissed as fabrication: email exchanges, meeting schedules, time-stamped approval drafts, and most importantly, system logs confirming user actions. At this point, Jessica's face truly turned pale. She tried to interrupt, but my lawyer stopped her with a concise statement. "Please maintain order. We are presenting evidence." I stood silently, my hand resting lightly on the edge of the table, watching it all unfold. I didn't need to say much. The more I spoke, the more they could edit my words. I let the document speak for me, and then the final, decisive blow was delivered, like a pair of scissors cutting through their facade. My lawyer spoke slowly, each word deliberate. The signature that was forged was not my client's signature on a personal document. It was my client's signature, used without authorization, to legitimize 2 transactions withdrawing funds from the project. A gasp went through the hall. People were no longer whispering, they were audibly reacting. Michael's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. My lawyer continued, his voice even. "The individual who actioned the approval did so using an internal account under the management of Mr. Michael. We have system logs confirming the time, the device, and the sequence of actions." Hearing this, Michael turned a deathly shade of white, the sweat on his forehead glistening under the stage lights. He whipped his head towards Jessica, his eyes filled with a murderous rage. "You said you took care of it." The words slipped out, an uncontrolled outburst. And that very sentence was a public slap in the face to Jessica. She stumbled back, her lips trembling, her eyes darting around for an escape. Helen, who had been sobbing, was shocked into silence. She stopped mid-wail, looking from Michael to me, as if she couldn't understand how the play "Detain Her" had suddenly turned into "Detain My Son." The security guards no longer stood with Michael with the same certainty. They exchanged glances, then looked towards the shareholder representative standing near the entrance. At that exact moment, the older gentleman from before stepped forward. His voice was deep but decisive, cutting through the chaos. "There's no need to drag this out. Mr. Michael, please come to the temporary meeting room. As of now, your executive authority is suspended pending a full audit." The announcement landed like a hammer blow. Michael stood frozen. Jessica was speechless. Helen clung to the table as if she were about to faint. And I let out a soft, quiet breath, because I knew from that moment on they no longer had the power to create their own story. Now it was the truth's turn to put everything back in its proper place. The moment the shareholder representative announced the suspension of executive authority, the air was sucked out of the ballroom. Michael stood frozen, his lips moving but no words coming out. The same people who had been toasting his success just moments before now exchanged wary, suspicious glances. As for Jessica, she looked like someone whose luxurious gown had been ripped away, leaving her exposed and unsure whether to move forward or retreat. She was the first to react. Following the instincts of someone accustomed to performance, she spoke up, her voice high-pitched, trying to flip the narrative one last time in front of the crowd. "This is all a setup. She's jealous. She couldn't handle the fact that Michael found someone new, so she made all of this up." She pointed at me as she spoke, desperately trying to reduce the situation from a matter of corporate fraud to a simple case of a woman's scorn. I looked at her, feeling no anger, because I understood that when people run out of logic, they resort to emotion to dilute the truth. I didn't retaliate with harsh words. I simply walked to the document table and pulled out a single sheet of paper I had prepared in the sealed envelope. I handed it to my lawyer, then looked directly at Jessica, my voice calm. "You can say I'm jealous, that's fine, but this isn't about jealousy. This is about your personnel file. I paused just long enough for the room to fall silent again, then continued. Your HR file shows signs of concealed information, and someone within the system helped you bypass several background checks. Jessica flinched, the kind of flinch from someone whose darkest secret has just been touched. She shook her head repeatedly, her voice sharp. You're lying! What right do you have to look into someone's file? I still didn't raise my voice. I just answered concisely, the right to ask questions when you are in a position that affects the capital and reputation of a strategic partner. That sentence made many in the room turn to each other. Strategic partner and capital were words no one took lightly. The shareholder representative took another step forward, his voice deep but sharp, clearly audible without a microphone. Miss Jessica. He said her name, and she seemed to shrink. He looked directly at her and asked a question that was like a final nail in her coffin. You were disciplined at your former company for fraudulent activity, were you not? A collective gasp went through the hall. It was just one question, but it dragged her entire past into the light. It wasn't a rumor, not an insult, but an official inquiry from someone with the authority to ask. Jessica's face turned ashen. She stood frozen for a few seconds, then whipped her head towards Michael, a desperate plea in her eyes. All the arrogance was gone, replaced by raw, naked panic. But Michael was like a broken lock. He didn't dare to speak. He didn't know what to say. Anything he said now could be used as evidence against him. He looked down, avoiding her gaze, avoiding the eyes of the crowd. Jessica trembled, her voice stammering. I didn't... They framed me. It's a lie. The more she spoke, the weaker she sounded. People can lie once, but no one can lie their way through an entire system of inquiry and verification. Helen, who had been wailing just moments before, was now frozen solid. She watched Michael being escorted to a meeting room, watched Jessica being interrogated in public, and I saw something very real on her face. Fear. Not the fear of losing face, but the fear of losing everything. Her eyes darted around as if looking for an escape, and then her tone shifted so abruptly that everyone noticed the change. She rushed down from the honor table, pushing through a few people to get to me. She grabbed my hand, her grip tight, her voice suddenly soft as cotton. Honey, this is all a misunderstanding. Let's go home and talk. Don't make a scene. That word honey sent a chill through me. The day she pushed the divorce papers at me, she didn't call me honey. The day she blocked the door and kicked me out, she didn't call me honey. Now that the tide had turned, she said it so sweetly, as if there had never been a wound. I pulled my hand away, not violently, just firmly enough for her to understand I no longer belonged to that family. I looked at her, my voice soft, but each word landed with weight. The day you pushed me out of your house, ma'am, did you let me talk? Helen's mouth fell open, her eyes blinking rapidly, but she couldn't find an answer. Because the only answer was no. At that moment, across the room, security and the shareholder representative were formally requesting Michael to go to the meeting room for the audit. They asked him to hand over his phone to check the system access logs. Michael clung to the microphone one last, desperate time. I was framed. But his voice had no power left. No one believed his words anymore when the data was lying on the table. Jessica was also asked to step aside for a private meeting. She walked away as if her legs were made of jelly. Her face was white, her sophisticated veneer stripped away, leaving only a woman terrified of her past being exposed to the world. She glanced back at me one last time, her eyes a mixture of hatred and pleading, but I didn't hold her gaze. I didn't need to win with a look. I only needed to win with the truth. Helen could no longer stand. She stumbled back to a nearby chair and collapsed into it, as if all her strength had been drained. She muttered to herself, her voice distant. It's over. It's really over. I heard her, but I felt no joy. I only saw the rightful consequence of a life spent looking down on others. When you get used to stepping on people, you get used to the feeling. But when you fall harder. I looked around the hall at the once celebratory faces, now filled with confusion. I knew that among them, some would pity me, some would fear me, and some would hate me. But I didn't need them to take my side. I just needed everything to be put in its proper place. I turned back and said the final words of this chapter, not to gloat, but as a concluding statement. I don't need an apology from anyone. I just need the truth to be in its rightful place. After that night, things didn't end with a loud explosion, but with a series of quiet, heavy decisions. The board convened immediately, with no press and no fanfare, just closed doors and people confronting the truth. Michael was immediately dismissed from his position, his phone confiscated for the internal investigation into the forged signatures and project fund withdrawals. He didn't resist. He no longer had the strength to cry foul. When the entire picture is laid bare, all excuses become redundant. Jessica's fate was no different. Her employment was terminated that same night, cleanly and decisively. There were no more congratulations, no more stage lights, no more flattery. I saw her leave in silence, her face pale, her eyes filled with the disorientation of someone who had just woken from a long, beautiful dream. The glamour had faded faster than it had arrived, leaving only a woman facing the consequences of the shortcuts she had once been so proud of. I left the ballroom later than everyone else. The air outside had cooled, the breeze a welcome relief from the suffocating tension of the evening. I thought I would feel an immediate sense of relief, but I didn't. There was a strange emptiness inside me. It wasn't a sharp pain, just a void, as if a chapter of my life had closed before I had a chance to name it. My phone buzzed constantly. It was Helen. I stared at the screen for a long time before answering. On the other end, her voice alternated between choked sobs, sharp anger, and desperate pleading. "If you don't save him, our family will be destroyed. After all, you were once one of us." She went on and on, repeating the same fear over and over. Losing her son, losing her reputation, losing everything she had taken for granted. I listened without interrupting, without offering comfort. When she finally paused, I replied with one quiet sentence. "You once taught me to know my place. Now, I am finally doing that for myself." After I said that, I ended the call. Not out of anger, but because I knew that if I kept listening, I might soften and forget the price I had paid to stand where I was today. I saw Michael one last time in the hallway before he was moved to a different office. He was no longer in his tailored suit, no longer wearing his confident smile. He stood there, his shoulders slumped as if carrying the weight of everything that had just collapsed. When he saw me, he stopped, his voice choked. "I was wrong. Please, give me a way out." I looked at him for a long time. In that moment, I felt no hatred, only a sense of distance, as distant as looking at someone who was once very close, but had long since strayed from our shared path. I spoke slowly, my voice not loud. "I gave you my youth. You burned it yourself." He lowered his head. I knew my words weren't meant to hurt him more, but to end any illusion that I still owed him anything. After that, I did what needed to be done. I followed the law and procedures, signed the necessary paperwork, and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. No arguments, no bitter words. I didn't want my victory to come from stepping on people who had already fallen. I just wanted to take back what belonged to me and move on. As I left the building, I didn't look back. Not out of pride, but because I knew that if I did, I would see the old faces, the old memories, and I would start to wonder what if. And what if is the one thing that keeps you trapped in a place that is no longer meant for you. That night, I got home very late. I sat alone in the quiet room, with all the lights off, save for the soft glow from the window. Only then did I allow myself to reflect on everything. I realized the greatest pain wasn't the betrayal itself. The greatest pain was knowing that for a very long time I had put my faith in the wrong person and then blamed myself for believing. But without that faith, perhaps I never would have learned how to stand as tall as I do today. I don't call myself strong. I am just a woman who grew tired of bowing her head for too long. There comes a point when you have to straighten your back, not to win or lose, but simply to stop the pain. Some families are bound by blood, but blood is not enough to keep you there if all that exists is disrespect and calculation. What holds a home together isn't a title, and it certainly isn't one-sided sacrifice. It is respect. Once respect is gone, staying is like standing under a leaking roof, feeling a cold drop hit your heart every single day. And when you are soaked through, when you are cold enough, leaving is not an act of betrayal. It is the only way to save yourself.